Holocaust Memorial Day in the United Kingdom is commemorated as being the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau by the British Army towards the end of the Second World War. But as you quite rightly say, it is not just the Holocaust where we commemorate the death of 6 million Jews at the hands of the Nazis, but we also look at all the other genocides and attempted genocides across the world. And clearly at this time, we also therefore remember the attacks that have been made on the Kashmiri Pandits, on the Dogra community in Jammu, Kashmir. So we must remember that from the time of partition in 1947, the attacks on people from the Hindu population and other religious minorities in the Kashmir Valley extended right the way through. And unfortunately, when we look at partition, we think of India, Pakistan being created. We then, of course, had the Liberation War for Bangladesh in 1971. But during the whole of that period of time, we also have to commemorate the bravery of the Indian Army, who initially, back in 1947, had to go in and resist the Pakistani brigands who'd invaded Jammu Kashmir in an attempt to divide the princely state of Jammu Kashmir into separate parts. We then, of course, have seen over the years, I'm afraid, the various different wars that have been fought between India and Pakistan, and also the illegal occupation of a sovereign part of India by the Pakistani military, the Pakistani occupied Kashmir, and the sponsorship of terrorism across the line of control. The line of control, of course, being the longest line of control anywhere in the world, occupying more troops on both sides of the line of control in trying to police it. And remember that we have at least 45 terrorist bases based in the illegally occupied part of Kashmir by Pakistan, where terrorism is sponsored and promoted to attack the people of Jammu and Kashmir. We must also, of course, commemorate the dreadful day back in 1990, when the Kashmiri Pandits were forced to, in an exodus from the valley, from their historical home that had been their home for thousands of years. When the message went out from the various different mosques, the message which was clear and amplified of leave, convert or die, with a very simple message. And we commemorate those hundreds, if not thousands, of people that lost their lives. Of course, those people that left are still refugees, whether they are refugees in Jammu or whether they've moved further or across the world. We must commemorate those brave individuals who stand up for the course of history. And we should be clear, this was an attempt to wipe out the Kashmiri Pandits and indeed to forcibly convert the women and to change the valley from being a multi-religious valley in favor of one religion only. Irrespective of one's views about different religions, it cannot be acceptable that people are persecuted for following their religion. And I think this is the message that we must impart to the world, that this was a way of ethnic cleansing and of genocide in the Kashmir Valley. And we must also remember that the Kashmir Valley is a very small part of the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir. It is, after all, the decision made by the Maharaja back in 1947 that the entirety of Jammu and Kashmir should be a part of sovereign India. Ladakh as an area, of course, is predominantly Buddhist. Jammu is predominantly Hindu. And now, of course, Kashmir is predominantly Muslim. But that doesn't mean anything for anyone really, because India is a secular state where people can celebrate their religion irrespective of what it is, and are safeguarded by the constitution. The same cannot be said for Pakistan or for the illegal occupied area by Pakistan of Jammu and Kashmir. And I'm afraid still I receive on a regular basis the reports of attacks on minorities. This is completely and utterly unacceptable. And we who prize the fact that we can celebrate our religion in peace and harmony, call out the attacks on the minorities and say this must not be allowed to happen. If it does happen, then we must call it out for what it is, and that is attacks on religious minorities, and make sure that the world knows about each and every one of those attacks, so that people are safeguarded in their own homes and in their own place of living. And the very sad fact is, in the Kashmir Valley, I think I'm the last serving British Member of Parliament to actually visit Srinagar back in February 2016. And the most heartening thing, that despite everything that's gone on, what people were crying out for was peace and security in the valley, so that the economy could be recovered, that the opportunities for tourism, with a beautiful part of the world, the opportunities for agriculture, handicrafts, hydroelectric power to be generated, and indeed, of course, having a smart city which would benefit everyone, regardless of their religion, regardless of their background. And I had the privilege of meeting people from all the various different religions, and it was probably the most heartening fact of my visit that despite all that had gone on, people still wanted not only to live in the valley, but wanted the valley to be safe and a safe place for everyone to return. So we must remember what happened, and we must commemorate the martyrs, but also look to the future and the opportunities there are if there only can be peace and security. That peace and security can only come if Pakistan desists from sponsoring terrorism and dismantles those bases. The Pakistani military should leave their illegal occupation, and India then could resume complete control of the entirety of Jammu and Kashmir for the benefit of the entire population. And of course, we've heard only just recently further fighting between the brave Indian forces and those of China, who occupy illegally once again part of Ladakh, part of Jammu and Kashmir, the princely state. And those people, those brave soldiers, deserve our utmost respect. Very sadly, again, I understand that some have lost their lives in defending their country. And it's a great shame that these military incursions are still taking place by China into sovereign Indian territory. I've moved an early day motion in the UK Parliament, as you quite rightly say. This is an expression of political belief and has garnered support from several different political parties, I'm pleased to say. And essentially, what we should see is the Genocide Act enacted by the Indian government. I'm a big supporter of the government of India, but I think there is a need now to actually enact that act. It's not for me or the UK Parliament to tell the Indian government what to do, but just to express our support for that Genocide Act, so that the people who very sadly lost their lives are commemorated. The people that lost their territory and their homes are also properly compensated and given the right to return to their ancestral home if they so choose. And I think these two things, I think, are vitally important. And what I do know about more than anything about India is, of course, that everyone prides themselves on the Indian constitution and the sensible measures that the Indian government took about removing Article 370 and the other amendments to the Constitution, which only affected Jammu and Kashmir, gave special rights on a so-called temporary basis that lasted for 70 years, suggests to me that this brings in line the Constitution of India to the entirety of India. And that's absolutely the right thing to do. I think it's absolutely right that we should see a position of the Genocide Act brought in, and obviously the consequences of that enacted in the Indian Parliament and beyond. And I would be very pleased if the Indian government do this for the benefit, particularly of all those people of Indian origin who live in the United Kingdom and who look to India as a bastion of democracy, of secularism, and the opportunity to celebrate their faith in peace and harmony. Well, clearly we have to understand the basis of it. And much of it comes from people who convert to a particular fundamental religion, and it becomes all-encompassing. It encompasses their entirety of their lives, and they become, shall we say, more fanatical as a result of converting to that religion. So that's the first thing to say. The second is that there are many people who can be influenced by their religious leaders and by others to do things they would not do otherwise, to sacrifice themselves in the name of jihad, I'm afraid, to commit violence against other people. That is something that we should not allow to foster and to grow. We, as governments go, governments must combat this in every shape or form, and call out those religious leaders in particular who inspire others to commit acts of violence on their behalf. I think that's a vitally important aspect of democracy in this world. And it's very important that examples are set and followed right across the world. There is an age-old truism that some people say that one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter, and this is always the challenge that exists. It clearly depends on the circumstances of often of the victors. The victors that call themselves freedom fighters, those that are not victorious are the terrorists. So we have to be careful about how we define these particular issues, but clearly the people that rise up against the state, in particular where there is a democracy, but people that rise up and use violence to achieve their aims are quite clearly terrorists, and we need to call them out for that. Unfortunately, terrorism is rife throughout the world, and people can be inspired to commit terrorist atrocities for all sorts of reasons. I happen to believe that it's not the fault of a religion that people commit terrorism. It is a fault of religious leaders who inspire individuals to commit these acts of terror. And therefore, it's incumbent upon those religious leaders to actually preach non-violence, to preach the capability of living side by side in harmony with one another and respecting one another's religions, one another's beliefs. There is in a democracy, there is a way of achieving power, and that is via the ballot box. And if you can't achieve it through the ballot box, clearly that leads to frustrations. But those frustrations, I'm afraid, have to be that you've got to win hearts and minds and not commit acts of violence against them. Well, obviously, India has been, unfortunately, the victim of many acts of terrorism over the years, as has the United Kingdom. I do know that, very sadly, of course, because of this dreadful pandemic, our Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, could not visit India for Republic Day, which is a great shame for everyone. Let us hope that that visit can happen very soon, once we are over our respective peaks of this virus. Our Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, was in India at the beginning of January. I believe a very successful visit. Not very. It wasn't very prominent in the media during that time, but clearly there's a huge opportunity for international trade between the UK and India. India now is the second biggest investor in the United Kingdom, and the UK is the sixth biggest investor in India. We need to up our game and against the competition in India. But also we can cooperate in the fields of defence, particularly, I suspect, in the operation. This is a cooperation between nations. This is not, the master servant or colonial way. However, using our Royal Navy in particular and our expertise in combating terrorism, we can have defence cooperation, we can have security cooperation, and indeed we can have other elements of diplomatic means of combating the type of illegal action that we're talking about. I take the view of saying that there is a clear cooperation between many countries, be it the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, India, Israel, the free world, essentially cooperating together to combat the forces of evil that exist, I'm afraid, around the world. And I think by doing so, it will be to our mutual advantage, because clearly there are, I'm afraid, there are other powers that seek to use the opportunity of undermining the democracy in India, and indeed attacking India both militarily and also in trade. And I think why we have to be quite clear that we are going to combat that. We are partners now in the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. It is absolutely right that in the Commonwealth we should cooperate together. I think that I've got a message of hope. I think you live in a land of beautiful scenery, the opportunities for tourism, the opportunities for using the handicrafts and the agriculture, and indeed generating your own power, electricity through hydroelectric power. Fantastic opportunity for Jammu and Kashmir to be literally. I mean, it is the. We always talk about it, the Venice of Asia, and indeed it has the opportunity, I think, to be that. And so I think the message is that everyone has to understand that if there is peace and security, then great things can flow and everyone can flourish. There is no reason why people cannot live beside each other, irrespective of their religions, going forward. And that is what I hope to see happen, because after all, Jammu and Kashmir is the jewel in the crown of India. And I think it's just a great shame, a great pity that for so long it's not been able to reach its full potential. So I think the message is clear that good times potentially are on their way. What we do need is everyone to cooperate and agree to coexist rather than to fight each other. I think there is a great opportunity, and it's up to all of us to encourage that opportunity to be grasped by all concerned. I think the reality is that where acts of violence are committed against people, then clearly there must be a way of bringing those people to justice and bringing and calling them to account. The United Kingdom has always stood for fundamental freedom of expression, freedom of thought, freedom of religion, and the freedom to reach your full potential. It's one of the reasons why so many people of Indian origin have chosen to come and live in the United Kingdom, because we operate in that way. And the people that have come have really not only made it their home, they are now the backbone of the economy of the United Kingdom. And so therefore, there is absolutely every reason why we should be cooperating very closely together, build on our friendship, build on the opportunities of the relationships between our respective prime ministers, and make sure that actually we collectively deliver for the people of our great countries, and to do so on a partnership basis, which after all is the best way of delivering things, where people are seen as being equal partners, not one dominating the other. I think there's a great opportunity here that it's up to us to grasp and take it on in the right sort of way. And the only disappointing thing about this COVID, well, one of the most disappointing things, I suppose, but the most disappointing thing about this COVID crisis is that I can't come and join you in India because of the restrictions on travel. I hope that we will soon get over this and that I'll be able to come back and see it firsthand once again. The beauty of the valley, the city of temples of Jammu, and indeed see some of Ladakh, because I've been to Jammu and Kashmir. I've not been to Ladakh, and I'm looking forward to seeing some of that as well. And then, of course, I'm also, as you quite rightly say, been honoured by the President of India, having been made a Padma Shri. And so far, unfortunately, the ceremony had to be cancelled last year. So eventually we'll have to have a ceremony in Delhi for me to receive that honour from the President. And it's only disappointing that I've not been able to visit and celebrate with you all, as I'm sure that you would all wish.